Now, last week I spent some time talking about the consensus media or the media party. You just can't trust them, I told you. Now, I've been saying that for years, even while working among these folks. In fact, that's why I say it. I've been up close, been inside the candid conversations. In 2006, I watched as journalists covering the Conservative campaign, they were riding the bus, used the Pink List, a list put out by EGAL, that's the Gay and Lesbian Lobby Group, to determine which local Conservative candidates they wanted to speak to. We were pulling into Kitchener for a rally and I heard a bunch of voices going through the list. If a Conservative MP had spoken out against gay marriage, then this group of reporters, all from different media outlets and supposedly all competitors, wanted to speak with the candidate. If the local candidate supported gay marriage or was neutral, then they were in the clear. Some of you might remember stories about MP Harold Albrecht refusing to speak to reporters back in January 2006. Yeah, they were all the reporters looking at that list and they wanted him on gay marriage. They didn't care about the other candidates wandering around the room. The media party has an agenda, folks, and it isn't to tell you the truth. If you call them out on that, they will attempt to shut you down. Now, over the weekend, Conservative blogger named Dean Skarenko, he goes by the online name BC Blue, received an email threatening legal action if he did not remove this picture from his blog. It's a picture of Andrew Potter, an admitted Liberal partisan and national news editor for the Ottawa Citizen. He's a partisan, he writes as one, and then pretends he isn't when he's editing his newspaper. Skarenko had posted on the cozy relationship between Potter and other media folks who, again, supposedly work for competing outlets. This photo is all over the internet. Others appear free to use it, as long as they don't question Potter and his liberal orthodoxy. See, don't question, folks. The professional journalists won't like it. On Friday, one of the chief cheerleaders for heroin injection sites, Dan Gardner, challenged me to name names. Gardner was upset and he was venting his spleen on Twitter, something he seems to have an awful lot of time for. Do these people have jobs? Really? Gardner was venting because I'd made a comment about most journalists supporting junkies shooting heroin. I stand by that. Why? Not because I think journalists are junkies. No, the industry's sobered up from its days when it was filled with alcoholics. But that doesn't mean the industry's smartened up. Did you look at the coverage of Inside over the weekend? I did. I saw a lot of cheerleading and very little of what reporters pride themselves on doing, asking tough questions. From the Globe, the Supreme Court of Canada has issued a stern rebuke of the Harper government's law and order agenda in a landmark ruling putting the safety of drug addicts against the Conservatives' hardline stand against illegal drugs. Globe Justice reporter Kirk Macon, who prefers bold judges that make decisions like this one, then goes on to quote former Liberal Mandarin and Liberal Party donor Errol Mendez as an impartial observer. Mendez tells Macon, "This is probably the first major strike against the Harper government using hard-right ideology to counter evidence-based health and social initiatives when they impact charter rights." Did you catch that? The Conservatives are hardline. They're hard-right. They ignore evidence, according to the Globe. Of course, the Globe, like most of the media, ignore that this is not a legal ruling but a public policy pronouncement. Well, they don't ignore it so much as celebrate it without telling their readers explicitly that that's what it is, and that what they really want to say is, "Hey fellas, the good guys at the Supreme Court, they're back in charge." The Globe's coverage was an orgy of celebration that Insight can stay open and heroin shooting galleries can soon spread across Canada. The Toronto Star was a little more subdued than the Globe, but they also failed to offer a critical word on the ruling or its implications. I've spoken to people who are happy with the outcome of this ruling, but can still see the Supreme Court has moved into the policy department and is looking at changing the drapes. You would expect that in the National Post, the Vancouver Sun, or some of the other major papers across their country, there might be a negative word about this ruling. I didn't see any. Judging by the predetermined media narrative, there are only hardline and hard-right conservatives who are against this. You know, the flat earth people. That's not true. I've spoken with doctors, with drug counselors, and with addicts themselves who reject the so-called wisdom of harm reduction. You don't read their views in the paper, see them on the other TV networks. No, Their views are not the views of the media party, who made up their mind on this long ago, and so have never shown them to you. This is about more than insight. And so if you support the court's decision, fine. It was a bad legal decision, but maybe you like harm reduction. Reasonable people can disagree and still talk, but you need to open your eyes when it comes to the media. How often do you see what are supposed to be competing media outlets all telling you the same story, and most of the time, only one side of it? It happens because there is an agenda. There is a left-wing slant to our media in this country. The default position of reporters at every single media outlet I have worked in, regardless of how right-wing and bat crap crazy we supposedly were, well, the default position of the reporters has been left-wing. Again, has anyone else showed you Obama's call for billionaires to pay the same tax rate as Jews? We showed you this last week. We'll show it to you again.
If asking a billionaire to pay the same tax rate as a janitor makes me a warrior for the working class, I wear that with a badge of honor.
They haven't shown you that, but they have shown you Sarah Palin's daughter being accosted in a bar. They won't show you their anointed one committing a really bad gaffe. There are still more stories by the media party about me being called to testify about the CBC's access to information problems than the media party have dared to write about the simple fact that the state broadcaster has trouble releasing documents. And I don't know if you caught this gem over the weekend. It was a front page story about a man who was set to announce his candidacy for the leadership of the NDP, Paul Dewar. It was in the Ottawa Citizen. Again, it said, "Dewar's politics born of his faith." It was a screaming headline, big black letters above the fold. That's not how politicians with religious leanings are often portrayed. In fact, at every election, we're warned about those crazy evangelicals or hardline Catholics in the Conservative Party. But Dewar is given the soft treatment. His parish, St. Basil's in the West End of Ottawa, is praised. Dating back to the 1950s, St. Basil's has a reputation for producing political activists with a Christian conscience. Sounds so nice, doesn't it? I'm sure St. Basil's is a lovely parish. But that's not the usual "look out, here come the Christians" line, like the one Marcy MacDonald tried to start over Christians in government while she was promoting her dreadful book last year.
I just don't want people to sleepwalk into this, to blissfully harbor some idea of Canada that hasn't existed for some time. We have a very strong, organized Christian right, not nearly as organized as in the United States, but it is growing, it is here to stay, and it's determined to have a voice in government.
Yeah, that was CBC's Wendy Mesley nodding along as CBC, like most of the media, lapped up MacDonald's book. Now, kudos to the blogger Moose and Squirrel. We must have seen the Dewar article and had the same thought. There's a bias here. Someone sent me her post with the link to that video. See, the point here is that left-wing Christians are good and worthy of praise. Right-wing Christians are to be feared. I applaud Paul Dewar for getting into the race, and I do not for one moment question his faith. He's quiet about that. I respect that. What I do not respect is the media bias of saying one is good, the other is bad. I encourage people of all faiths to get in politics. Be open about it. Be open about who you are. But know this, if you are even the slight bit conservative, especially on the social issues, the media will badger you about your faith because they will not like it. If you challenge them, you will be called out. They will call you ignorant, racist, a denier, if you dare question them and call them out on their bias or their adherence to progressive orthodoxy. But don't let them intimidate you. Question. Question boldly and demand the truth.